Okay, without further ado, thank you very much to all of you who are joining us or rejoining us. For those of you who were part of the psychology stream, we hope you enjoyed that. And we also hope you enjoyed the art stream, those of you who are on the art stream, both very good sessions, and thank you for your interactions in those sessions. So I'm Simon, I'm from MPW. Most of you have seen me on screen a number of times now. I'm very pleased to have brought together the Ready for Excellence program this summer. This is our third of 6 Fridays, so we've got lots of more sessions still to go. We've got our 3 colleges, and we are trying in these sessions just to give you a taste of what we do, even if these are slightly bigger groups than we would normally teach. We have a couple of house rules. Everybody's been fantastic about keeping their mics on mute. Unless the session leader, in this case Bridget, says otherwise, please do that. Questions via the chat function, as most of you know, and thank you for your many questions that are coming in. We really appreciate that. So this session is part of our transitioning to advanced level skills stream. So Bridget is with me again, and Bridget presented last week on reading skills, and this week is on writing skills. And so as we go through the different skills needed for advanced level study. For those of you not here last week, so Bridget Hutchins joined MPW in 2012, initially as Director of Teaching and Learning and now Head of Learning Support. Having previously been Director of Sixth Form at a girls' school, Bridget teaches IGCSE and A-level English language and English literature, and has experience as Principal and Chief Examiner with the OCR, marking at senior level, also with Cambridge Assessment and AQA. Finally, Bridget is the author of MPW's Getting into Pharmacy and Pharmacology Trotman Guide. So thank you, Bridget, for doing this today, and we look forward to your session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon, and a warm welcome to everybody today. And as Simon said, we did a session last Friday, which was about enjoying reading, and inevitably the skills of reading and writing go very closely together for A-level. So what we're going to begin by doing is just thinking about, in general, why we write. And then we're going to be looking into very specifically the kinds of writing that you'll be developing for advanced level study. So clearly when we write, we record our knowledge, our understanding, and our response to the world in which we live. And clearly writing is fundamentally how you are going to be assessed at A-level. So even if you are doing a subject, for instance, such as art, you would have a sketchbook in which you are going to be recording your processes and evaluating your work. And writing for a range of purposes is a skill to be learned and developed. This chat box, as Simon said, is for you to kind of interact with the presentation. So you can make contributions, you can ask questions. What I'd like you to start by doing is recording into the chat box what subjects you are planning to study. And it might be that at the moment that's not still entirely firm, but to give me some idea of the subject areas. What type of writing you think that's going to involve at A-level? So I get some idea of what you think A-level writing will be required for the subject areas. And then what you would like to learn from this session, so that I can have a look at that as we go along. And at the end, when there's questions coming in, we can check that we've actually responded to that. So if you just have a couple of minutes, what are the subjects? What kind of writing you think that's going to involve? And then if there's anything very specific you would like to learn from this session, if you can record that into the chat box for me. Lovely. So we've got psychology, law and maths. We've got biology. We've got a really good range of subjects coming through. We've got maths, physics, geography, French, and somebody referring to the extended project qualification. And I will mention the EPQ, but there is also a full session on the EPQ later on today. So that's brilliant. Yeah, we've got a wide range of subjects actually coming in. So if you could put a note for me as to what kind of writing you feel that is going to involve for you. So if you are going to be an economics student, what are you expecting is the kind of writing that you will be expected to do? So we've got the idea, obviously, about essay writing. And we'll talk later on about how you construct essays. Any other form of writing that people think that you're going to be doing? Yep, so a lot of academic writing. Somebody's referred to doing an EPQ. That's brilliant. Yep, evaluative. So that certainly is going to be one of the areas that we'll look at about the shift from GCSE to A-level. Then if at the moment anybody wants to record any specific areas, they feel that they want to cover. Yep, and somebody's popped in analytical writing. That's brilliant. Okay, so if we're kind of returning to that, then when we're moving from GCSE, you will find that the writing is teacher-led. And often it would feel as though you're being given a template, you're being given a very tight structure. Relative to A-level, more limited subject-specific vocabulary, a lot of the material is provided for you. It assesses fundamentally your knowledge and understanding, and there will be some analysis. And if you're writing an essay, particularly in an exam, it's probably around 2 sides of an A4 pad. And then as you move to A-level, it's more student-led. You're going to develop your own style, your own approach. The vocabulary is more complex. You're expected to incorporate wider reading and research. And as somebody mentioned, or as we've had a couple of contributions, it's assessing your analysis, the evaluation of that knowledge and understanding. And if you're writing an exam, probably writing around 4 sides of A4. So if you can now record into the chat box, because we're going to think about the fact that for A-level, one of the areas we're going to be exploring is note-taking. That was something I briefly mentioned last week. We had a couple of questions. So just, how you go about taking notes. And then how, so far, because everyone will have done a wide range of subjects, whether you have any particular technique that you use when you're planning essays and answers to longer questions. So for some subjects, you might have 2, 4, 8-mark questions. And when it comes to an 8-mark question, you've got to have a plan for those. And then if there's anything particular you find challenging about writing. So I'm just interested to know whether people have identified a particular note-taking approach that they use, how they go about planning, and if there's anything very specific they find challenging. Brilliant. So we've got flashcards on PowerPoint using each slide as a side of a flashcard. And somebody else, so Jessica coming in and saying, yeah, flashcards, mind maps. And we will talk about and have a look at effective mind mapping and what actually can work particularly well. So whether you come to MPW or whether you go to other sixth form schools and colleges, you're not expected to magically transform. And I think sometimes that's what it feels as though you might be expected to do, that you move from being that GCSE student with a tighter help and support to suddenly becoming that independent learner and writer. You will be taught those writing skills. So, the success iceberg, what people see on the top is the success, but underneath you will have times of disappointment, failure, sacrifice, hard work, but the persistence, the discipline, the dedication is all underneath that. So yeah, at A-level, you're going to be writing more, greater depth and detail, linking your knowledge and understanding with analysis and evaluation. And one of the things at A-level you'll become familiar with are what we call the AOs, the assessment objectives. And AOs in exams equal marks. And those assessment objectives are weighted towards analysis and evaluation rather than simply recall. So you will get to know the objectives for each type of question and which ones are the most dominant. So for the subject I teach, English literature, for instance, at A-level, AO1 is the knowledge and understanding of the text. AO2 is analysing the language and the structure. AO3 is to do with exploring the context of that piece of writing. AO4 is about comparison. And so some of the questions will actually have one of those objectives far more dominant. And, you know, there's no point spending a lot of time integrating context if that is not being assessed in that type of question. So it's really important that you get to know those assessment objectives. And clearly how much writing, the form it takes, will vary according to the subject. So English literature, humanities, much more extended writing than sciences and mathematics, but biology students do write essays. And so, you know, keeping up those skills is really important. So when you're writing, one of the ways in which you'll be using notes is to make notes in preparation for a lesson. So reading through a textbook, looking at resources to see how much you already know, to record the questions you're going to ask in those lessons. And then maybe something you're not so familiar with, but at A-level, where you're keeping notes as a lesson progresses from discussion, then we always recommend that preferably the same day, you write up those lesson notes, because you need to be able to check you've understood it, you can remember what you've learned. And clearly also, you'll be writing to collate and record material for essays and coursework assignments. So you'll always be asking yourself, is this the best I can produce? How can I improve my work further? And the idea is that you're going to plan and structure a focused response to a question. So one of the things we often see is somebody saying, I wrote masses. And you find that they've done what I call paintballing a question, and everything's just got thrown at it. So students lose marks when their carefully written response doesn't fulfill the task. This was something we briefly referred to last week. When you are writing, particularly in an exam, but when you're practicing, you do need to understand the command words and how they're used in each subject. So you might be asked to analyse, to assess, to compare, to contrast, to describe, to explain, to evaluate. And those key words, those command words, it's always really useful to have turned into a what you understand by that. What do I need to do when they want me to outline? And I mentioned last week is looking out for hidden traps. When you're writing a response, make sure you've picked up if there's anything like a hidden negative, evaluate why the economy was not the government's priority. And obviously being clear about what you're expected to do. So as an examiner, I often get really frustrated when I know that somebody actually understands, but it's asked them to explore 3 reasons and they've either done 2 or 4. And certainly if you're doing a subject where you've got to use a diagram as the basis for explanation, then in writing, you've got to not only draw the diagram, but actually make sure you've used it. And then obviously identifying the right part of the material. So last week we had a quick think about different types of making notes. And there are specific types. So one of these that somebody mentioned last week was something called the Cornell method. And the best note taking actually also engages you with it rather than just copying things out. So, just to sort of show you an example of what that actually looks like. Let me just find that for you. It was up on the screen a moment ago. I might have to go back into that in a moment or two's time. There it is. So the Cornell note-taking method actually has a cue column, a note-taking column, and it says during a lecture, because it's suitable for a university as well, you will record using these shortened sentences. And then the idea that you ask yourself questions based on your notes, and you write those questions to kind of help you to clarify the meanings, to reveal the relationships between ideas. And it's also obviously really helpful for being able to answer exams And then this idea of reciting, covering it up, looking at the keywords, and then asking yourself how you can respond to the questions that you've put in there. And then taking time to reflect on that. So that written material, you're going to ask yourself questions. What's the significance of this? What principle are they based on? How can I apply this? How does it fit with what I already know? And then spending time reviewing those notes so that actually they become something that you've really interacted with. So you can look up, obviously, the details of the Cornell method, but the idea of memorizing, revising, rather than just recording. Outlining simply means having main headings, subheadings, and then the key points under that. Other people obviously enjoy mind mapping. We're going to look at mind mapping, particularly when you are producing a lengthier piece of writing. Other people produce what's called the box and bullet method. So they will extract the main ideas and then the supporting details. So they have the main ideas in a box, and then they put those supporting details directly below, next to bullet points. And as somebody mentioned, they talked about flashcards, which is great, but making revision cards as you go along. When you start A-level, the best thing to say is not, I'll do that as it gets closer to revision, but to actually keep it going. Because now the exams are at the end of 2 years, you won't have time to go back and make all of these notes and make those very effective revision cards later on. Do them as you go along so you don't end up getting overwhelmed. So whatever method you're using, essentially it's recording, it's reducing, so taking all of that information down, so you're processing it, reciting it, so that can literally be reciting it out loud, reflecting on it, and reviewing it. So this process of note making, like I say, is not just a passive copying, but it's the idea that you are actively getting engaged with it. So one of the things I hear people say to me all the time when they're going to write an essay or a longer task is, you know, what an A-level RS student says, I've got all the ideas in my head, but they won't go down my arm and onto the paper. Or I know what I want it to look like, but somehow I can't get it there. So this sense of frustration is really common. So we've got the problem areas, interpreting the question, organizing the main ideas into an essay form, writing clearly and concisely in fluent English. So if we think about what an essay is, because I think often people have this great mystique about what an essay actually is. And essentially, it's just a continuous piece of writing in response to a question. It's written in paragraphs, developing and connecting the ideas, and it has an evident sense of direction, like a well-planned journey. So if I'm traveling, as I will be doing later on today, from Exeter up to Birmingham, I've got an idea of where I'm setting off from, where I want to be at the end of it, and I will have certain markers along the way. If I suddenly decide when I've pulled off at a service station that I want to shoot off 30 miles south, I'm probably not actually going to end up where I want to be. So we're just going to have a look at mind mapping so that we can think about how we can use that really efficiently. Okay, so we're going to think about why these mind maps in terms of preparing for a piece of writing or revising are useful. We're going to think about how to create them properly. So they were invented by a man called Tony Buzan, who said, although we read and write like this, we think more like this. So he's interested in the way we read and write and the way we think. And people often think spider diagrams are the same as mind maps. It's a bit like saying these are the same. So a mind map, when we're thinking about that, the difference is based on how we use our brains. So if you are a left left-sided brain thinker, you remember events in words, what was said. Your right side, you remember them in pictures, what you saw. So as we go along, just think about which one would be most applicable to you. So if somebody tells you about an event or you are remembering an event, do you remember what was said? Do you remember what you saw? Left side prefers working alone. Right side prefers working with other people. Left side good at spelling. Right side good at thinking up creative stories. Left side enjoys maths. Right side more likely to enjoy art. And already I would imagine there'll be some people thinking, actually though, I can do some of both of these. Left side likes to read, right side might be drawn more to listening to music. Left side will make a step-by-step plan for getting on with the task. Right side will think more about the final product, not how to get there. So I just want you to record for me in the chat box whether you feel generally your preference would be more left side than right side. Let's just see what we've got in terms of people recording, how they think then they generally respond. Okay, so if you'd like to record into that, whether you think you're more left side, or whether you're more right side. Okay, so I want you to look at this, and for you, which way does the dancer turn? Are they anti-clockwise or are they clockwise? If it's anti-clockwise that you're seeing, then you're a left dominant brain. If it's clockwise, then you're right dominant brain. And with practice, people can switch between the ones they use most. So just take a moment to look at this chart and say the colour, not the word. So see whether you can across the top say green, red, blue, yellow, blue, black, or whether you're immediately saying yellow, blue, orange, black, red, green. So this is the left-right conflict. Your right brain tries to say the colour, but your left brain insists on reading the word. So the idea about mind maps is they're going to bring those two sides together in that way. So they're useful for remembering and revising, planning out writing ideas, planning ideas for presentations, stopping this. All right, so we have a picture of somebody clearly tearing their hair out. So just take a few minutes to see how much of that you can read and remember. It says spending 5 to 10 minutes reading. Let's just see how far you feel you would get with that. And how much you'd remember of it. Because this is the kind of text-heavy note sometimes. I mean, this is obviously an account of somebody's holiday, but in terms of the way that often people, having made notes in writing, then try and actually use them, they will often still have large quantities of text. On the contrary, you could spend 2 minutes literally just looking, because probably in 2 minutes on the previous one, you didn't get really very far. So we can get a sense of what Jordan did on his holiday, and his mind map is good. There it is again. So we have our 6 rules of mind mapping. Turn the page to landscape, start in the center, leave enough room for the branches, use the images to help remember the content, use color for each branch. So we're trying to make things really memorable. Use keywords and short phrases, and don't have obviously any more than about 5 to 7 branches. So if you were given a task such as writing a 1 to 2 minute speech about why students need the summer holiday and how they can enjoy them, what we're needing to think about is how you are actually going to create this mind map. And so we can look at the central image, we can look at colour, we can think about curving those branches, whether we're going to draw pictures, whether we're going to do it in paper form, or whether we're going to actually do it in a computer form. And so if we look on the sort of problems maybe that might emerge, then the downsides to computer are perhaps, am I having trouble adding a branch? Maybe for some people slowing down the creative process. Benefits of paper can be easier to follow, allows more freedom. So there are all different ways in which you would need to think through how those actually are going to work for you. So if we just go back then to whereabouts we are, we've got an interesting mix of people coming back and giving us their thoughts about where they feel that they fit on that. So we have people quite rightly saying, I think I'm a bit of both, that I can see it actually, in both ways. And, the idea that someone's just put in, it's a bit like a picture says 1,000 words. The mind map is more like a picture. So it is to do with what's actually going to work best for your brain. So when we're planning this essay, what we need to think about is setting up in an introduction the interpretation of the question, and that we're signalling where that essay is going to take us. Don't make your introductions generic. So what I've tended to find in long years of marking, particularly English literature and English language questions, is that people will create a standard introduction and they will want to put in standard information. And they're not really then focused on the question. So what needs to come back to the examiner is they need to feel secure you are answering that question and that they know roughly whereabouts you're going. The main body of that essay then develops those ideas. They're written in paragraphs and each one deals with one clear aspect. So I talk about having a topic sentence at the start of each paragraph. So that if I was simply to read, a bit like if you're reading a newspaper article, the topic sentence, the first sentence in each paragraph as I went through, I would be able to see the skeleton of the essay. And the topic actually then is made clear at the start. Obviously, then it expands the ideas. So it will give examples, it will give evidence, it will give justification. So that's where all of that development of the idea, that evaluation comes in. And essentially, if we're thinking about the topic sentence as being like the skeleton, it fleshes out the argument. Now, there can be, obviously, depending on the subject, discussion about whether we use that personal pronoun I. But for many subjects, that is perfectly acceptable. I will begin by, or if you want to be a bit more detached, the argument of this essay will explore. Having argued that X, I now wish to consider Y. Some scholars might object or agree with, or further support for this claim comes from. And then we use connectives. Connectives actually link together. They're the glue that builds together your argument. However, alternatively, moreover, it's necessary to consider, furthermore, on the other hand, I've got on the other hand twice, this would suggest in addition, as a result. So we can see that very clear line coming through. If you're ever uncertain whether your essay actually is delivering the content clearly, it's a good idea to get somebody who is not a subject expert to read it through, because then you'll see whether you've clearly communicated. Often people feel that at A-level, they're suddenly going to have to write in this very grand, complex style. What I often find is that when people try to do that, meaning gets obscured. The conclusion, essentially, is your last chance to impress. That's the bit the examiner will have read last. So you're going to be drawing together the main points, providing that kind of an overview without simply repeating what you've said. And that conclusion will refer back to the first paragraph of the title, and where appropriate, express a personal response. So things to help you. You need your own writing style. You need a structure that, unless the actual mark scheme requires it to be in a certain order, you need a writing style and a structure that suits you, you feel comfortable with. Often when people first start, they're trying out different ones. One thing I would want to say to you is that when you move from GCSE or any kind of pre-A-level work, you're going to be getting much higher grades than when you first start. And when you first start, you are experimenting, you are learning. The other thing that's really helpful is that exam boards have exemplar responses on their websites. So, if they have mark schemes that are based in levels, they will say, this is what a level 6, if that's the top level, response looks like. And it will have an examiner's commentary to show you why that was a top level response. And if it's a level 3, which is sort of mid-level, more likely to be getting perhaps a C grade, then it would explain what were the good qualities, but where were the areas that particular candidate could develop. When you're working in class, then it's helpful to work with somebody else. Look at how their responses are coming together. Ask the teacher, if you are struggling with essay writing, to show you how a perfect paragraph can be written. And learning to write a perfect paragraph and practicing that so you can see how that's structured is the most beneficial thing you can do. So, some of the exam boards are OCR, AQA, Edexcel, and as Simon mentioned, Cambridge Assessment. If you are having difficulty, then talk to someone. So if you are coming to MPW, then we have directors of studies at London and Cambridge. We call them personal tutors in Birmingham. They're the same role, people there to help and to support you. And in whichever school or college, there will be a learning support team. Take on the EPQ, the extended project qualification. Anybody who wants to learn to write, whether that's fiction, whether it's journalism, are always told that the best way to develop those skills is to do more of it. And if you have a look to the left-hand side, then there is a lovely picture of Martin Blythe from Birmingham College, which is where I am, who is going to be doing a session on the EPQ. And as Martin will be saying to you, those extended writing skills are vital for A-level and university. And you will be doing a project where if you are doing a response that is all as a written response, you'll do a 5,000 word piece of writing, and universities love it. So they will give grade offers more. They will actually, in many cases, lower the grade requirements if you have done the EPQ. And Martin will be able to tell you a little bit more about that later on. And as I was saying with reading last week, if you find that in the end, despite all the help that you've been given, despite all the practice you've been doing, you are still struggling, particularly in exams at A-level, to get things down, to be able to put your knowledge and understanding in writing, it's always worth requesting an assessment of your processing speed, your working memory, and your writing skills, because those may have actually been adequate for GCSE, but because you're a bright student, you may actually have masked an underlying problem. So I had a student who joined with C grades at A level, perfectly adequate, if actually that student had not wanted to attend universities that required A star and A, and could not understand why the knowledge and understanding that she had was not getting rewarded at A level. That student had an assessment, and a year later had taken those 3 A-level grades up to A star, A star, A, and in addition had taken on a 1-year A-level, an intensive course, and had also gained an A star in that. And that was to do with the way we had actually supported her in being able to sort out what was happening between getting that knowledge and understanding and being able to record it, and being given some extra time in exams and strategies. What can you do now? I always think, start now reading, making notes of what's interesting you and what you're wanting to know. You can go now to the exam board website, so you can look at those specifications and you can look at past papers, so you know in advance what type of writing you need to do. That might still be helping you in this final decision making. Reading in a variety of genres, formats, registers. So register is it formal, is it informal? Because actually the more you read, the wider your vocabulary becomes and the better your written style is. So the more you see of really good writing, the more you will actually mimic that yourself. So there you are, busy reading. And one of the things you could do is you could try writing a blog, your response to national or global affairs, and it could be linked to subjects or issues that engage you. Because for many students, particularly not having had GCSE and IGCSE exams this summer, it could actually be quite a long gap between you having done practice essays, practice questions, and suddenly hitting the ground running again in September. So the more you actually write, then obviously the better and the more skilled you become with that. So we've just got, I think, probably about 5 or 6 more minutes. If there's anything that people would like to put in, any queries into the chat box, then obviously I can pick those up for you.
So Bridget, thank you. We had one question during your presentation before, if anybody else has any questions, which was, will any college always give you a breakdown of the lesson so you can prep beforehand?
Yes, the MPW way of actually approaching this is to give you, ahead of the whole year, you'll get a year plan, which will show you what topics and what key areas you're going to be dealing with. But equally, on a lesson by lesson basis, the tutors will always be telling you at least a few sessions in advance what you're going to be covering, so that you know which topic area is coming up, what kind of skill is coming up, and particularly because not only are textbooks provided, but course outlines, course books for that, then you are able to kind of read in advance and to prepare for those lessons. So I think, yes, having a really good understanding of what's coming up, when's that actually going to be, and what kind of task you're going to be engaged with is certainly really helpful. I don't know if that helps, Simon, or whether there's anything else you feel we should be adding to that.
No, I think that's a very full answer to that question. So, as I say, if there's any other questions, if you want to put them in the chat box, that would be great. We'll give you another minute just to do that. And I'll just review if there's anything else. I'm not sure there was.
I mean, certainly, obviously, things such as, the mind mapping presentation, and the general overview, will be available. Writing, like I say, is really something that, a bit like exercise, you get better at by doing, which is why I'm suggesting that even something such as keeping a blog, anything where you are doing some writing every day, because I think we have, don't we, a world where so much of information and recording is actually done on computer. But for the vast majority of students, when they go into an exam, they're back to that traditional way of recording something by actually writing. And I know that through lockdown, one of the things that people have really appreciated is actually getting a letter in the post, because yes, a lot of communication is normally done face to face, but actually having somebody write to you is a really great way of interacting with them and feeling that somebody cares about you. And that writing really obviously just helps to keep that skill going. Bullet journaling, absolutely. Yeah, I would always say that anything where you are writing and you are thinking, processing, putting ideas down is an excellent way. So yeah, I would really encourage that, Jessica. That's a good idea.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, one more here.
Yeah, I mean, for the majority of subjects and tutors, then they are perfectly happy for you to take notes, actually using a laptop. Most of the time, for most subjects, you would also be given either a workbook or notes, that are actually also emailed or available to you. And I think what's important with that then is that you're interacting with those. So whether a resource is given out, it's a handwritten resource, or whether it's an electronic one, that actually you're highlighting, you're recording notes and things next to that. But yeah, certainly, taking notes directly, on a laptop can be very helpful to people. I think the main thing, though, to make sure that you're doing is still engaging with the lesson, because sometimes that can occasionally, for some students, just kind of break their concentration and their involvement actively in the session. So I think as long as you are very comfortable with using that laptop and can move between that and interacting with the lesson, that's absolutely fine.
Just a question there about what bullet journal means.
So, I mean, from my perspective, actually doing bullet journaling is actually not writing great extended entries into something, but actually keeping a journal where you're recording thoughts, reflections. And for some people, that can also involve, building into that images, pictures, anything that's sort of kind of recording their response to the world.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So
right, that's lovely, Simon.
So Bridget, thank you very much for being part of this today and to come